Welcome to a new, very tiny mini-series that I'm jokingly calling Better Late Than Never, where I catch up on all the Star Wars stuff that I saw happening at Star Wars Celebration, but was too busy to cover in depth. Today I'm diving into the Andor trailer, which was surprisingly and refreshingly different. The whole thing is scored by some very unique music set up by a man in a watchtower banging on a metal drum that then kicks into some throat singing. An article on StarWars.com describes it all as a warning to villagers that something evil and far-reaching is coming, the Empire. Next, we see some fairly primitive-looking people camped out by a river, watching as a ship crashes into their atmosphere overhead. I'm gonna guess this is a flashback to Cassian's childhood. Maybe this is Cassian as a young boy. The Rogue One Visual Dictionary says his homeworld is the planet Fest, so we could be seeing it for the first time in live action. It first appeared in the video game Dark Forces. These peaceful people are probably about to experience a major change. In Vanity Fair, Diego Luna described Andor as a refugee story, with desperate people fleeing the Empire at the full force of its power. It's the journey of a migrant. That feeling of having to move is behind this story very profoundly and very strong. That shapes you as a person. It defines you in many ways and what you are willing to do. In that same Vanity Fair article, Tony Gilroy said, "We see a planet that's completely taken apart in a colonial kind of way. The Empire is expanding rapidly. They're wiping out anybody who's in their way. The story begins with the destruction of Andor's birth world, then follows him into adulthood when he realizes he can't run forever. His adopted home will become the base of our whole first season, and we watch that place become radicalized. So I think the planet with all the trees is probably Cassian's homeworld, and then the more ruined-looking planet with the droid will become his adopted home." That's where we spend a lot of this trailer, and I think it looks great. I'm sure this series will be using the volume, but we've also seen that they built quite a few large sets for Andor, and I think it shows. I also really like the on-location shots. Both The Mandalorian and Obi-Wan Kenobi have had some on-location shoots, and they've come off feeling a little fan-filmy to me. I think part of it is because I recognize that they just filmed out in the hills of Los Angeles. Andor shooting overseas has the benefit of feeling more exotic to me. I wouldn't be surprised if people over in Europe have the opposite feeling. Los Angeles might feel more exotic to them than these grassy hills and forests. But I also think there's something about the way these scenes in Andor were filmed that elevate it? I don't know, I'm not smart enough to explain why. It all just feels more intense and grand to me. I'm really interested in the men in the blue uniforms. They definitely look fascist, but I don't recognize them as specifically Imperial. Our friend at Celebration suggested something I like, that they could be a civilian police force of some kind. Basically, citizens of the planet that believe in what the Empire is doing and have been hired to work against their own neighbors. Basically like the New Caprica police force if you've seen Battlestar Galactica. We keep our focus on one of these blue uniformed people throughout the trailer, and I think he might be someone who joins up with the enemy and slowly realizes the mistakes he's made. Or maybe he'll be a villain the whole time, I don't know. In stark contrast to all the landscapes, we travel indoors to see workers in white uniforms all in a white room building something. It kinda reminds me of the KX droids, but the one farther away seems to have a lot more limbs. I assume this is all Imperial controlled, even if the workers are conscripted. I really like all the stuff we see with those workers throughout the trailer. It feels very much like THX 1138. All of the Imperial stuff looks awesome, sterile, artificial, imposing. All those white uniforms sitting in a white room. It's a striking image, and I'm excited to see Anton Lesser making his way into Star Wars. I liked his creepy portrayal of Qyburn in Game of Thrones. Seeing those Imperials drinking caf or whatever while they have their boots on everyone else in this series immediately makes me dislike them. I'm excited to see Death Troopers in this. I think they were mishandled a bit in Star Wars Rebels. They were pretty ineffective whenever they showed up, but they still have such a presence that I'm hopeful that they can be more intimidating again in Andor. I'm assuming these structures in water are also Imperial. I'm immediately reminded of the Raft from the MCU and Marvel Comics, the prison for superheroes. It could also be just some sort of resource-gathering installation, but the fact that we cut from those structures into what definitely looks like a bunch of cells makes me think it's a prison. Maybe it's both. Maybe all the people in the white uniforms are prisoners and they work inside these things. Shifting over to Coruscant, I am thrilled to see it again. This is probably going to be its most significant appearance since Revenge of the Sith, and I love the political thriller vibe we're getting surrounding Mon Mothma, people watching her. I love the shot of her in the speeder looking through the window. Something about it just gives off a sense of danger. I know she's going to be fine, but I'm still worried about her already. That shot of her at the dinner party, seeing her have to put on a fake smile for everyone around her. I might be more interested in her side of the story than Cassian's right now. It's also nice to see her wearing some new outfits, and what a cool story for Genevieve O'Reilly. To be in Revenge of the Sith, but to have your scene deleted has got to stink, but then she gets to come back for Rogue One in a larger role, and now she gets to come back again as one of the central characters of a series. The way they discuss her in the Vanity Fair article, she sounds like a co-lead, and that's awesome. I'm so excited to see her making moves in the Imperial Senate, and I cheered when we actually saw it again. I can't wait to see how it's different, and it looks very empty. I think I can make out a couple people here or there, but it makes sense that the Senate would be fading. Mothma's back is part of a really cool montage of lots of characters standing or walking in front of the camera. We can see members of the Imperial Army, an Imperial base or two. Most interestingly is a shot with some clone troopers. And honestly, this is the kind of environment I think of when I recall Fest from Dark Forces. Drab, gray, a little snowy. The fact that the clones aren't painted makes me think we're in the early days of the Empire as they spread out and take over. The Rogue One Visual Dictionary mentions Cassian and his family being part of the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the Clone Wars, so this could be part of that, or it could be the Empire really putting their foot down on systems that defied the Republic. There are a couple of characters I haven't talked about yet. We see a young woman in a handful of scenes. I believe Cassian's sister was rumored to appear in this story, and I would guess this might be her. Stellan Skarsgård appears in a couple shots. He was said to play a rebel leader named Luthen Rael. I think that was the name they gave him at Celebration. I think he'll be great in Star Wars. I'm kind of thinking he'll be a Draven-type character, maybe slightly shadier within the Rebellion, and willing to go a little farther than Mon Mothma. Of course, I also expect we will see Saw Gerrera in this. Maybe the power hierarchy for Cassian will go Saw, then Rael, then Andor, the way it went Mothma, Draven, Andor in Rogue One. The first season could be all about Cassian joining the fight against the Empire, doing all those terrible things he mentioned to Jyn, and then the second could be about him joining Mothma's rebellion, the kind where you don't lose your soul. Although, we still see him doing terrible things like shooting Tivik in the back in Rogue One, so I don't know, I'm just spitballing. Speaking of that progression, Tony Gilroy said at Celebration that Andor will take place 5 years before Rogue One. The first season will follow Cassian for a year as he goes from loner to fighter for the cause. Diego Luna said, "You're not gonna recognize Cassian at the beginning. He's a very selfish man. You're gonna see a guy who's waiting for that awakening to happen." Gilroy said the second season will take us from 4 years before Rogue One all the way up to the film. I think we're gonna get more of a greatest hits of the rebellion there. I'm expecting season 2 will have more familiar characters appearing. K2SO is the obvious choice, but really any rebel character from Rogue One makes sense. Characters from Star Wars Rebels as well. In Vanity Fair, Gilroy said there are 211 speaking parts in season 1. 75 of them really matter, and at least a dozen of them are seriously important characters that will carry forward into season 2. It sounds pretty big. I was really excited to see this trailer. It got a good reaction at Celebration too. I heard a lot of people talking about how cool and different it was, which is nice after hearing so many people online saying they have no interest in this series. But that's Celebration for you. It's not Twitter or YouTube comments. But hopefully this teaser helped change some minds because I think Star Wars could use something a little different. But that's it for today. Let me know what you thought of the trailer in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.